The New York Giants are potentially facing being without a guy who's responsible for over 32% of their offense this weekend, and that's not good. We'll get you updated on wide receiver Malik Nabers' status and how the Giants might have to adjust to his potential absence. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. It is appreciated. And if you are watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel. Like the video, click the little bell so that you are notified every time I post a new video. It all helps. And if you're listening on our audio platforms, what also helps is a 5-star review. So anything you can do is certainly appreciated by yours truly. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we've got to go there, folks. The Giants could potentially be without Malik Nabers this weekend. So I'm going to give you an update on where things stand as of Thursday. And if they have to go without Malik Nabers, how are they going to get around this, considering that, Malik Nabers has basically accounted for over 30% of the Giants' offense. So we'll talk about that to start. Then I'm going to transition in segment 2 to a dilemma that's developing with the Giants. If the Giants lose this weekend to the Seattle Seahawks, they might have a decision that they're going to have to consider making. And I'll tell you what that decision is, and we'll kind of weigh the pros and the cons and try and anticipate which way they end up going. But it's something that really nobody's talking about just yet, but I think needs to be talked about. And then finally, I thought we would end the show in segment 3 with a little fun topic. And I saw this on Twitter. I don't remember who raised the question, but I thought it might be a nice little fun topic. What would you change if you were Roger Goodell? If you had the power to change anything in the NFL, what would you change? And I have a couple things that have long bothered me about the NFL that I would change if I had the power to do so. So that's our show for today. Again, thank you for joining us. Let's talk Malik Nabers, ladies and gentlemen. So Malik Nabers still in the concussion protocol, still in the early phases. Now, what does that mean? It means that he is not yet cleared to put on the red jersey and participate in non-contact activities. And, you would have liked to have seen that happen today, Thursday, as I record this, because you figure, okay, you get through the non-contact activities, you're a little further on in the protocol, and you're on track maybe to have a chance to play on Sunday. Malik Nabers isn't there yet. And we're running out of time because, look, the Giants have one more practice, all right, that being on Friday. Saturday, they're going to have, I believe, a brief walkthrough, and then they've got, a 6-hour flight to Seattle. I hate to say it, ladies and gentlemen, but barring a miracle overnight, doesn't look good for Malik Nabers playing this weekend. Now, Malik Nabers, as I mentioned, has accounted for roughly 32% of the Giants' offense, and that's a big chunk to replace. And I don't know if you guys remember, my everydayers might remember this, but a few weeks ago, I did a show asking if the Giants were over-relying on Malik Nabers. And I said in that show, well, what happens if, an opposing defense figures out how to take him out of the game? Or if, God forbid, he's injured, what do the Giants do? Well, guess what? Now they got to figure out what they're going to do. So what is the backup plan? What can they do if Malik Nabers is indeed declared out? And we'll have a game status for him tomorrow. My guess is I think he's going to be declared out. But if he practices tomorrow, he'll probably be listed as questionable. But my feeling is he's going to be declared out. But anyway, so let's get into it. If Malik Nabers does not play, I think obviously the option is to get Jalen Hyatt more involved. Now, one of the reasons I think why Jalen Hyatt has not been as involved in the offense as maybe some people would like, Jalen Hyatt, he's a good young receiver. He's got speed. He's got the will, works hard. But when you look at the little intangibles, such as fighting for the ball, such as, running sharp routes, they're just not there. And I get the feeling that the coaches are maybe a little bit more comfortable with Darius Slayton and where he's at with regards to those two elements, which is why you see Slayton playing more than Hyatt. If you remember back into the summer, Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton were basically competing for the same roster spot, and Slayton won it. So Hyatt, obviously, if Malik Nabers isn't able to go, he probably gets a few more reps. But what I think the Giants do in terms of their game plan and what I would do if I were the Giants, considering that the Seahawks defensive line is banged up, I might try to lean a little bit heavier into the run game. And that includes, believe it or not, design runs for Daniel Jones. I mean, look, I know last week against the Cowboys, the Giants couldn't run the ball. They just couldn't. I think they had 26 yards on 24 carries, 1.1 average. But, you've got to play to your opponent's weaknesses. And right now, I view that defensive line for the Seahawks based on the injury situation as a potential weakness. The Giants, you would think their offensive line, which the run blocking hasn't been great. But you know what? If I'm them, maybe pull a surprise out. Maybe throw in Evan Neal on as a sixth run blocker instead of having the tight ends the way they've been doing it. Now, you're probably saying, Evan Neal, what are you, crazy? But hear me out on this, folks. Evan Neal, believe it or not, is a really good run blocker. He really is. He's a good run blocker. Pass pro is his Achilles heel right now. And that's because I suspect he's still trying to get comfortable after, having success on the left side, still working to get comfortable on the right side. And by the way, missing times due to injuries has not helped with expediting that process. So if I'm the Giants and I want to pull out a real, surprise on Seattle, I put Evan Neal in there for run blocking situations, especially if we're going heavy, because running with 12 and 13 personnel didn't get it done with the run game. So if Evan Neal is as good of a run blocker as his stats and film would indicate, why not mix it up and see if he can't help with some of that run blocking as a sixth offensive lineman? Hey, can it be any worse than what they've been doing? I don't think so. But anyway, getting back to my point now, I haven't really addressed the passing aspect of it if Malik Nabers isn't in there. I've gotten this question quite a bit. Will the Giants elevate Isaiah Hodgins? I could see that being the possibility. I think a lot of it, though, is going to come down to what the Giants' game plan is. In other words, if they're going to lean more heavily into the run, maybe they say, okay, you know what? Let's see what our cornerback situation is. Are we going to have Drew Phillips and Adoree Jackson back, or at least one of those guys back? Do we need to bring up a cornerback? And then the other thing, do we need to decide between a kickoff returner versus, versus another receiver? So I think in all likelihood, Isaiah Hodgins will get elevated, but I don't know necessarily that it's a slam dunk. So if they do, and remember, folks, Wan'Dale Robinson has been limited all week with a heel injury, but I anticipate he's going to be fine. So you're going to probably see fewer deep shots. Not that the Giants have been hitting those deep shots, but fewer deep shots, a lot more short passes, What I'm concerned about, though, if the Giants take that plan of action, I'm concerned that they're going to the Seahawks are going to sit on those routes. They have a very, very good defensive secondary, Seattle does. And I don't know, I just don't think that the Giants are gonna, you know, I just don't see them trying a whole lot of deep shots. They just haven't been able to do that. And the other thing to take into consideration here, folks, with regards to the passing game, Lumen Field is really, really loud. I've been to Lumen Field a couple of times to cover games there. And even in the press box, you got to put earplugs in. It's that loud because you can hear and feel the vibration of the noise of the crowd through the press box, which is basically supposed to be soundproof. So if you're running the ball and you have maybe concerns about, I don't know, false starts in the crowd noise, which have been known to happen to opposing teams, maybe by running the ball, getting that run game going, maybe that's a way to counter it and loosen things up. So I'm curious to see what the game plan is, but that's how I would maybe look to attack the Seahawks if Malik Nabers doesn't play. And again, I don't think it looks good for his chances. I hope I'm wrong because they sure would miss him. The kid's dynamic. And look, when he does come back, let's hope that he learns that, sometimes it's okay to give up and live to see another down, as opposed to fighting the way he does and putting himself at risk for those hard hits, which was another concern that, I think people had with him coming in. So, all right, coming up next, if the Giants lose to Seattle, and they're not favored, by the way, they're going to have a dilemma, I think, that they're going to have to ask themselves, a big question they're going to have to ask themselves. What is that question and how might they go with it? We will talk about it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can get in on all the action during weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, when Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Get your payouts as soon as within 15 minutes after requesting them. So go on and download the Prize Pick app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus, as it's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Hey, Giant fans, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop for a visit with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL and it's twice a day. Make the new Locked On NFL your second listen on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and let's talk about a potential brewing Giants dilemma. If the Giants, actually, let's start here. Currently, the Giants have the 3rd worst record in the NFL behind the winless Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, who I think have the same record as the Giants, but are worse off, I think, in the points scored category. If the Giants lose to Seattle, they fall to 1-4. So here's the question that I think the Giants have to start thinking about. At what point, if at all, do they consider sitting Daniel Jones down? Now, for those not aware, and I think everybody probably is aware, Daniel Jones has an injury guarantee clause in his contract. If he were to get injured this year, and the injury were to be significant enough to where he couldn't pass a physical next year, the Giants would be on the hook for, I think, about 23 million guaranteed money, which not, you know, it's not something that I think will cripple them, but still, that's a lot of money if you're planning on moving on from the guy. So if the Giants were to lose to the Seattle Seahawks, at what point, if you're the Giants, do you start saying, okay, you know what? We really don't want to keep tempting fate, given Daniel's injury history. The season's lost. Why don't we just make the switch to Drew Lock? Here's my thought on that. I do not think the Giants will pull the plug on Daniel Jones if they lose to Seattle. It's still a question they've got to ask themselves, but I don't think they'll do it. I think for as long as, Daniel Jones is playing competitively, which, look, other than from week 1 when he didn't look very good, Daniel Jones has not been the reason why the Giants have lost. You can point to some bad decisions here and there. You can point to some missed throws, but has Daniel Jones been disastrous? No. So I don't think the Giants are going to pull the plug on him after, 5 games. I don't see it. I think what happens potentially is as long as he's playing decently, he will continue to get the chance. Now, if the Giants reach a point where all is lost, that there's just no hope for them to make a move on a potential wild card spot, then if you're the Giants, you got to start thinking about it. But if I had to take a guess, I would say that the Giants are probably going to give Daniel Jones at least half the season, at least. Because remember, this year they are looking to evaluate him. All right. They know what they saw in 2022. They know last year was an injury shortened year. This year, Jones has a number 1 receiver. He's got a better offensive line, better supporting cast around him. Brian Dable is calling the plays. And they want to be able to tell if he is indeed the guy. Now, what does Daniel Jones have to do to show that he's the guy? He's got to make more plays. And the one thing he hasn't done is that when you need a big play made, he doesn't come up with those big plays. So that's a problem. He may have cleaned up the turnovers for the most part, although I think the last few turnovers that he's had have been nullified due to penalties, except for that last one at the end of the game against Dallas. They've got to, once and for all say, okay, look, are we going to be able to win with this guy, or are we not going to be able to win with this guy? And I don't know, everybody is on a different side of the fence when it comes to this decision. I know there are Daniel Jones supporters out there. There are people that want to see Daniel Jones shipped out of town yesterday. I still have my doubts about Daniel Jones and his future here. I still think that, a fresh start is needed for both sides. I think Daniel Jones can still be a very good quarterback, but he probably, given everything that has gone down, including the off-season quote unquote drama and intrigue about whether or not the Giants were going to draft a new quarterback, that spoke volumes to me about what the Giants were looking to do. And I'll tell you why, because, the Giants will sit there and they'll probably say, oh, we want to play it out with Daniel Jones and see how he does. But they were all set to draft the quarterback if they had been able to move up last spring. That to me says that they were like, okay, you know what? If we can get him, let's get our quarterback in here of the future. We'll let Daniel Jones play out the year since he's got guaranteed money, get the kid ready. We move on after this year. So I would not be stunned, ladies and gentlemen, if the Giants do move on from Daniel Jones, regardless of how he plays. I mean, short of him winning the last, 13 games and taking the team to the Super Bowl, I think pretty much the decision has been made. And at this point, he does give them the best chance to win. which is why they're going to stick with him. They're also going to stick with him, I think, to be fair to him, give him a chance, put some good film on out there and just, see what happens from there. If the Giants get into a position to where they can get the quarterback of their choice next year in the draft. But, that's a point, the point that I made about how the Giants were all set to move on from Daniel Jones in the spring. And then all of a sudden they're telling us, oh, we're going to give him another look-see and see if he can't be the guy he was in 2022. That's kind of like what they did with the cornerback situation when they were trying desperately to get another cornerback in here, a CB1 or a draft pick, and then they weren't able to do so. And they were like, oh, well, Cordell Flott's our guy. Come on. Right? I mean, who are they fooling? So, again, the bottom line is, as the losses pile up, can the Giants afford to stay with Daniel Jones, knowing that that injury guarantee is staring them in the face? That's like rolling the dice and hoping that, you don't have a bad roll to where it's going to come back to bite you. And the guaranteed money that would be owed to Daniel Jones, if he, God forbid, can't pass a physical next spring, it's a big chunk of change that can probably help the team fill in some of the more, fill in more of the gaps that they have on this roster, including re-signing guys that they need to, such as maybe Jason Pinnock, if they want to bring back Darius Slayton, which I don't think they're going to be able to do. And, just basically continuing to build up the team. So that's the decision that the Giants, I think, need to ask themselves, at what point, if the losses pile up, when, if at all, do we pull the plug on Daniel Jones? All right. Coming up next, we're going to end it on a fun note. What would I change if I were the NFL commissioner? I've got two things that just absolutely bug me. And no, one of them is not what you think it is. I'll tell you what they are right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and hey, it's Friday. Why not have a little bit of fun? End of week, a disappointing week coming off the Dallas loss. Dang, when are the Giants going to beat the Cowboys? Got to be soon, right? Hopefully again in my lifetime. The Giants head out to Seattle. They're not favored in that game. I think they're I want to say 6.5-point underdog. A lot of people not giving them a chance to win. Spoiler alert, when I do my why they will win, why they will lose in a prediction article on New York Giants on SI, I ain't picking the Giants to win. I just can't. I need a reason to believe before I pick them again to win. And right now, I don't have it. And the Malik Nabers injury sure as heck doesn't help. Anyway, and I hope you'll read the article anyway when it gets posted, by the way. But anyway, let's end the week with a fun segment. And I would like to hear from you guys and gals. If you were the NFL commissioner, what would you change about the game? All right. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. You can drop them in the comments section below if you're watching on video, or if you want to send them in to me on via email. The information is down in the show notes. And I might just put an article together on that. I think it would be a cool article. I'd like to hear what you guys think. But here's what I would change if I were the NFL commissioner. Number one, and by the way, I know what a lot of you thinking. You're probably thinking, first thing she would change is she would get rid of the night games because she hates night games. Folks, I get it with the night games. And as much as I hate them and would like to see them go away and see every game be 1 or 4 o'clock like they were back in the day when I was growing up, night games are here to stay. So I'm not going to touch those, believe it or not. But here's what I would touch. Number one, given the officiating debacle in the Thursday night game last week, where it was pretty clear that the officials got two significant calls wrong against the Giants. And that happens not just against the Giants. You see this across the league. Why not make the certain calls that the officials throw the flag for, why not make them eligible for a challenge? I get why the league doesn't do it because they don't want to, upend or go over the heads, if you will, of the officials. The officials are supposed to be trained, but look, they make mistakes. And if the league can review scoring plays that ultimately influence the outcome of a game, why not be allowed to evaluate pass interference or face masks or not all the penalties. Obviously, holding, that's subjective. There are certain false starts that's pretty obvious. But why not allow pass interference, for example, illegal contacts, just certain penalties, and see if and make those reviewable? Isn't the goal, or shouldn't the goal be getting the calls right? And look, the officials are human, they're going to make mistakes. But how many times have we seen mistakes made that potentially cost teams game? And I'm not just talking about last week, the phantom call against Daniel Bellinger that should have been against Dallas, or the fact that two officials threw a flag on I think it was an end zone play there, and then they picked it up because there wasn't any penalty there. I'm talking about getting those calls right, because you just see too many of them, it seems, in the course of a season. And I would vote to change that by making certain calls reviewable. I'm going to give you one more. And I've been thinking about this because, I said I don't like night games and I wouldn't change that. But something's got to be done about Thursday night games. And here's what I would do. All right. I get it that, Thursday night games, it's the only game in town. It's a big draw. Look, last week at the Dallas Giant game, the press box was full. And I can count on one hand, since Giants or MetLife Stadium opened, the number of times that press box has been filled to capacity. Last week was probably, I think, a close second. The first time was back in when the Giants had the wild card game against Atlanta back in 2011. So what I would do with the Thursday night games is I would only schedule teams that are coming off a bye week to play on Thursday night. So that would mean maybe extending the buys to, I don't know, maybe giving teams 2 bye weeks instead of 1. That would obviously extend the season a little bit. But look, if you're all about player safety, and we all know that Roger Goodell constantly talks about player safety, but yet to ask these players to come back off of a Sunday game and play another game on a Thursday, good goodness, that's asking a lot of them physically. I don't care how good of a shape they're in. That is not, to me, conducive of player safety. So if you schedule a team for Thursday night that is coming off of a bye week, now that team has had plenty of time for their players to rest up and heal and to prepare correctly, because a lot of times teams coming off of Sunday games, the best they can hope for is, doing walkthroughs instead of full-fledged practices, which to me are just not going to get it done. So have teams coming off a bye play on Thursday night. Start the bye weeks early if you have to, or start the Thursday night games instead of week 1, start them in week 2 so that you can capitalize on, every team playing in the first week of the season. I know it'll never happen, but that's what I would like to see happen. I think maybe the player union would go for that. I don't know. I haven't asked them, obviously, but if it means more rest for the guys to get their bodies right, if it means the coaches can prepare the teams better and you get a better quality game on Thursday night, to me, it's a no-brainer. Now, again, what would you like to see change if you were the commissioner? I am really interested in hearing what you guys and gals have to say. So hopefully we'll get enough responses. And like I said, I'll either do an article or maybe next week I'll talk about it on the Friday show. So anyway, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you have a good weekend. Hope the Giant game on Sunday isn't going to be a disaster. I mean, who knows? I mean, let's hope it's not. But anyway, I will be back on Monday with an all new episode of Locked On Giants. We'll break down the Giants Seattle game. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.